This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
Well, we turn now to a growing nationwide backlash against the Supreme Court Citizens United ruling that opened the door for nearly unlimited political spending to influence elections. On Wednesday, California lawmakers introduced a resolution that calls on Congress to, quote, propose and send to the states for ratification a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United and to restore constitutional rights and fair elections to the people. Meanwhile, here in New York City, the City Council passed a similar resolution. All of this comes after similar measures passed in Hawaii and other cities, including Los Angeles, Oakland, Albany, and Boulder. On Friday, Montana's Supreme Court restored a 100-year-old ban on corporate spending directed at political campaigns or candidates. Last year, federal lawmakers introduced 4 different constitutional amendments to the U.S. House and Senate aimed at overturning the Citizens United ruling.
Some of the concern about the impact of Citizens United is inspired by the influx of unlimited corporate cash into Iowa's presidential caucus. Television ads sponsored by a political action committee that supports Mitt Romney plastered the state's airwaves, attacking his rival Newt Gingrich.
Ever notice how some people make a lot of mistakes?
It's probably a mistake. I made a mistake. I've made mistakes at times.
So far, Newt Gingrich has admitted his mistakes or flipped on teaming up with Nancy Pelosi, immigration, Medicare, healthcare, Iraq, attacking Mitt Romney, and more.
I made a big mistake in the spring.
Haven't we had enough mistakes? Restore Our Future is responsible for the content of this message.
That ad was paid for by a super PAC, or political action committee, called Restore Our Future. The PAC has no direct participation from the Romney campaign, but 3 of its founders were campaign staffers on Romney's failed 2008 presidential bid. Gingrich finished 4th in the Iowa caucus and accused Romney of trying to buy the election. Well, for more, we're joined by 2 lawmakers who helped introduce resolutions opposing Citizens United. California Assembly member Bob Witkowski joins us from Sacramento. He helped author Assembly Joint Resolution 22, which he introduced on Wednesday. And we're joined by Melissa Mark-Viverito, a member of the New York City's Progressive Caucus and co-sponsor of the resolution, which passed here in New York yesterday. Rob Weissman is also staying with us, the president of Public Citizen. Let's go to Sacramento, California. Bob Witkowski, talk about the legislation, the joint resolution that you introduced yesterday.
Well, good morning, Amy and Juan. California is the most populous state, obviously, and we want to send a strong message to the members of the United States Congress that we need to have Citizens United overturned, that it's just the influence of corporate money in our elections is just not going to be tolerated in California.
And what would it take to be able to get a constitutional amendment? This is a resolution, right? It's not binding even on the state.
Right, correct. It's a voice in the debate that's going on. And we understand that Congress has to go through the process of introduce the amendment, has to be ratified by the states, three-quarters of the states. So it's an uphill battle. But the dialogue and the outrage that people feel, and people in California feel, about this potential influence that corporate money is going to have on our elections is needs a vehicle, and this is where we start.
And Melissa Mark-Viverito, talk about the New York City Council resolution that you co-sponsored.
Well, basically, as the Assemblyman said, it's about really allowing this municipality to have a voice in this debate. We're seeing this discontent grow. Surveys demonstrate that people just don't want this level of corporate influence and dominance over government. And so this is a way of really adding our voice. I think it taps into the sentiment that we're seeing around the country growing regarding Occupy Wall Street, where people really feel that government is disconnected from the vast majority of the population. And because of this influence that corporate interests have, which is really representing that 1% and continuing to want to dictate the laws and regulations in this country. So it is, coming from New York City, a strong statement that we also, as a municipality, and hopefully the state will do the same thing here in New York, is to send that message that we want a constitutional amendment. Historically, obviously, most of these amendments have come from Congress, bringing it back to the states, and it's never been done at the state level, making the request to to the Congress. But again, we're seeing this grow across municipalities and across states. So hopefully this will lead to some level of resolve and resolution on this matter.
Who are the forces on this New York City Council? You're a city council member that push this forward and off the communities, like the community you represent. How does that fit in with campaign finance reform?
Well, we have one of the strongest campaign finance laws in the country is in New York City. And obviously this also impacts, this decision is going to impact local elections because your independent corporate interests can spend as much as they want. And so it is going to impact us. But we do have strict laws, and we've been historically the strongest to say that we don't want that level of influence in our local politics. And so my community, which is a low-income community, it is a community of color that a lot of times has been disenfranchised in general. You know, we obviously are very concerned about having our voice heard and having government really reflect the true interests and needs of our communities. And again, limiting corporate influence and dominance through contributions is one way of doing that.
You represent East Harlem.
Correct, East Harlem.
Hours before voters took part in the Republican caucus, former House Speaker Newt Gingrich appeared on CBS and publicly accused Mitt Romney of being a liar.
You said of Mitt Romney, somebody who will lie to you to get to be president will lie to you when they are president. I have to ask you, are you calling Mitt Romney a liar?
Yes.
You're calling Mitt Romney a liar?
Well, you seem shocked by it. Yes. I mean, what
Why
else
are
could
you
you
saying
say?
he's a liar?
Because this is a man whose staff created the PAC. His millionaire friends fund the PAC. He pretends he has nothing to do with the PAC. It's baloney. He's not telling the American people the truth.
Rob Weissman, what about this whole issue of how these groups have developed and their so-called ties or no ties that they supposedly have to the candidates?
Well, under the election rules, they're not allowed to coordinate with the candidates. And let's assume that they're not. They probably aren't. But in the case of the Romney PAC, as well as the Super PAC, as well as the others, it's exactly as Newt Gingrich said. It's run by Romney's prior campaign manager and other Romney friends. They're soliciting from the Super Romney donors, and they're running ads on behalf of Romney, doing exactly what Romney would like to do, but worse. So there's two key features of it. One is that because there's no accountability whatsoever for an entity called Restore Our Future, unlike there is for candidate Romney, they can do nothing but run vicious attack ads, and they can't be held accountable in the way that Romney himself would be if he were to run the ads. The other is that the Romney campaign's got donation limits. The Restore Our Future Super PAC does not. So they're getting donations on chunks of $1 million or more, and it's coming from individuals and from corporations thanks to Citizens United. We're really moving very quickly in the direction of massive corruption of the election process in a way that goes back at least to Watergate and maybe long before.
Rob Weissman, can you explain Citizens United, what this group was, what the Citizens United decision came out of, how it links to Hillary Clinton or an organization that Newt Gingrich, who seems now hoist on his own petard, worked closely with, Citizens United?
Well, the organization Citizens United is an extreme fringe right-wing organization. If you go to their website, they're very concerned about the UN takeover of the United States, and that's sort of one of their core agenda pieces. They also spend a lot of time developing so-called documentaries. And in the lead-up to the 2008 election, they did an hour-long video hit piece on Hillary Clinton, assuming that she was going to be the nominee for the Democratic nominee for president. Then the issue, as it turned into a court case, the issue was, could Citizens United air this hour-long attack video on Hillary Clinton on cable TV on demand? And that was actually a really narrow question under election law that's kind of technical, not unimportant, but not really that interesting. And that's how it was handled as it went up to the courts. When it got to the Supreme Court, that was argued that way the first time in front of the Supreme Court over that narrow technical issue. And the Supreme Court said, well, that's all very nice, but we're interested in a much bigger question, which is, can we just wipe away all restrictions on corporate spending on elections so long as there aren't direct contributions from corporations to candidates? So having decided what the question should be, even though it wasn't the question in the case, Supreme Court then held a new argument and answered the question the way they intended to, which was to say corporations have a constitutional First Amendment right to spend whatever they want to influence election outcomes.
It's interesting
so that was all
Newt,
generated from this organization, Citizens United.
It's interesting that Newt Gingrich made films with Citizens United, his own organization. But Juan?
Yeah, I'd like to bring back Bob Wachowski from the California Assembly member. What's been the impact, because California obviously has very expensive media markets throughout the state. What's been the impact of the Citizens United case on races already in California?
Well, so far we had like the city of Los Angeles and the city of San Francisco races. So our primary season starts in June, and I think folks are terrified, as Robert pointed out, that there's going to be this deluge of corporate money that's going to come in. And we also have a changed primary system where we have the top two voters are going to go into the general. So we're concerned that we're just at the beginning of a whole year of corporate spending to, determine what the outcome of the elections are going to be. So the spending hasn't started yet. They're collecting the monies, I guess.
And the issue of privacy, Bob Wachowski?
Well, I don't put much weight on the issue of privacy. I mean, corporations aren't natural people. The public has a greater interest, and we as legislators have a greater responsibility to let people know who this message is coming from. As it's been outlined on your show, we don't even know who people for good government are when they come in, and there's no accountability that we have with that. And this decision flies in the face of all the history of the United States of trying to limit corporate influence and trying to have these manipulations in our elections. It's really, it's quite scary right now in California with all the money that potentially could be spent on determining the outcome of races.
And I'd like to ask Councilwoman Melissa Mark-Viverito, as you said, New York City has one of the toughest campaign finance laws, and it also has a 6-to-1 public match for those who participate under the rules, but it hasn't stopped a billionaire from running for mayor 3 times and spending $70 to $100 million each time to get himself elected as mayor.
Right, and it's true. I mean, what we obviously would want to see is people to opt in to the campaign finance program, because it does create a level playing field. Everyone that participates in the program for the position you run, you're capped in terms of how much money you can raise and how much public money you get back to really have a budget for your campaign. But people can opt out of the program, and then that's where the amount of undisclosed money or the amount of money that you can raise for an election is one that is not capped in any way. So obviously that's where we saw our mayor independently finance his own campaign, and in the last election spent over $100 million on a mayoral election. So we obviously are concerned. And just to reiterate, the other issue with the Citizens United is the lack of transparency and accountability, that you don't know where this money is coming from, and you've already seen 2 years in how much additional money has been spent in the last election cycle. So really, it's a bad decision, and we're really concerned about the implications running into the future.
Melissa, you used to work for SEIU. This also involves union money.
Yes, but unions are made up of members, and it's very clearly known who the individuals are that comprise unions. And so when a union is giving money in a donation to a candidate, you know exactly where it's coming from. So there is that level of disclosure that it already exists. And fighting on behalf of worker rights and collective bargaining rights, to me, is very different than fighting behind an interest who actually wants to exploit workers and really limit government intervention in the protection of workers. It's a very different dynamic.
And in a moment, we're going to have very interesting discussion about what's going on in Indiana around worker rights. But I wanted to turn to one last clip.